Hi, we're at Polar Productions and we had a little problem and we used an old school fix, so I just kind of wanted to throw this out there for anybody who hasn't done this before. The basic problem was we recorded a tune with kind of a Latin groove in it, so the snares were turned off, so it had kind of a timbali sound, which is cool, but it didn't have that snappy snare sound, which is fine because it's a Latin groove. But it turns out in the middle of the song, there is about a 30-second pre-chorus or bridge section somewhere in there, which has a rock groove. The groove turns into more of a rock groove. It was kind of a modification to the arrangement at the last minute. So the goofy drummer left the snares off through the whole song. So even that little rock part, the snares were off. And then listening to it later, after we've overdubbed guitar and bass and a few other things, it's like, wow, wouldn't that be cool if the drummer had turned the snare back on during that little part and during that rock groove? So there's actually kind of a fix for this, kind of an old school fix you older dudes have probably read about or done, but I haven't done it before, so I thought I'd try it out. The fix is this: you basically re-amp or re-mic the snare. They used to do this in Nashville. If they had a snare that was kind of muddy and not bright enough and crispy enough, not snary enough, you take the dry snare signal, and you put it through a speaker. This is an old R-tone sound cube. I think I bought this in 1981. It still sort of works. And you put it on top of the snare drum, and then you play the snare track through it, and then you mic the snare drum, typically from the bottom with a small diaphragm condenser. It's like, okay, I can do all that. So so I did. So we fired up the snare track, which is this, basically. As you can tell, it doesn't really sound like a snare. It sounds kind of more like a timbali. And then you do that, play to the snare, and then turn the snares on. So that doesn't really sound so great either, okay? Because you got a lot of buzzing going on, okay? So what we ended up doing then was we took the basic snare sound, which is this. Okay, so you can hear that's got like a ton of low mids in it, and it doesn't have enough high mid or high end kind of attack in it. So what we did was we ended up, let's take a look here. We ended up cutting, we ended up boosting the high mids at about 3K by about 4 dB, and ended up basically taking out all of the low mids at about 200. So you go from this to this. So that changes the sound over here to more of this. And then you boost the low end and turn up the high end over here, and you end up with kind of like a robot snare. So there's kind of like, it's like you have a little invisible robot that's playing your snare drum, like a Disney animatronic thing, okay? Then you mic that up, typically underneath with a small condenser. So we ended up I put a Neumann KM184, that's this little guy right there on the left. I put that underneath, which is a real nice, very bright, small condenser. I mic'd it up underneath, and guess what? It didn't work at all. It was the sound spread out, it was ill-defined, it was very buzzy. It was like someone had hit a beehive with a baseball bat. So it didn't really give the defined sound I wanted. So let's go to something I know works well on the snare. So I put up the Onyx i5. That was a lot better. That's actually my favorite snare mic, and that was a lot better. But it was still a little too hi-fi, a little too smooth, a little not biting enough, because I'm not really trying to generate a snare sound here. I'm trying to generate just the crack, the high end of the annoying part of the snare. So old school, let's go to what always works, SM57, right? So this guy right here, this SM57 is an old, made in the USA. I bought that new, I think the first time I went on the road in 1981 to put on my snare drum. And I think I paid exactly what you'd pay now, which is about $99 for it. So 1981, so that thing is like 35 years old. And it's this annoying thing, but it actually worked great. So we have this sound. It doesn't have to be real loud. We mic that really close with the old SM57. It always works. If you want a rock sound out of a snare drum, you shove an SM57 on, you just beat the crap out of the drum, and it sounds great. It always works. It never doesn't work. It's not always the best thing, but it's always a good choice. It's maybe not the best choice, but it always functions. Okay, then we bust that over here to its own track, and we ended up with this. Let's take that off, take the EQ off. So the flat sound is this. I don't know if you can hear it on the iPhone, but it's just, again, a lot of low mids, not enough attack, and the sound decays over too long a period of time. So, same kind of deal. So basically over here, we ended up similar sort of EQ. We ended up boosting the highs at about 5K by 3 or 4 dB, and we ended up cutting the heck out of about 300 here. So we go from this to this, and it's still, the sound decays over too long a period of time. So then we throw a gate on it. So you go from this to this. So we have this short, sharp, staccato snare sound. And then we can kind of bring that into the mix along with the real snare drum. And we're getting close, right? We're getting close to what we want, kind of an actual rock snare sound. So we bring in the rest of the drum kit, the kick and the overheads and a little hi-hat. There's no toms on this particular track right now. So we end up with this. And that's close to what we want. Okay, so we need to beef up the drum sound a little bit. So we're gonna add a little parallel compression to the drums. Okay, so what we do is we ended up busing them over to a compressor to squash them. That's the DBX 160X, which is about, again, I think I bought that thing new back in the early 80s. That thing's probably 35 years old. It's where the yellow and red lights are fighting each other. It's a VCA-based, real fast compressor. It's not real hi-fi. It has a lot of attitude. It squashes stuff. So it sounds like this, basically. It's not anything you'd normally use in a mix, but what we do is we take that overly squashed sound and we do it in parallel with the normal hi-fi sound, and we blend them together. So you have the hi-fi sound and then the ugly attitude kind of up underneath, which sounds like this. We'll sneak it in underneath. So it adds a little bit of attitude to it. So then we're almost there. We have this. And then to glue the whole thing together, what we end up doing is we send the actual recorded timbali sounding snare along with the fake robot snare, and we bust them both over to the same reverb tank, which is a kind of a short, sharp, bright, annoying sort of reverb. And then it glues everything together. So when we do all of the above, we kind of end up with this. And there you have it. It has this nice, cool, big attitude rock snare. I don't know how it sounds on the iPhone, but it has almost like an Alex Van Halen kind of sound to it, bonky sound with a lot of attitude and reverb, which makes it sound like it was in a barn. So yeah, you could do, my brother right now is laughing at me because you could probably do this whole thing if you had Pro Tools. You could just replace the drum sound, poof, press the button and you're done. But we don't do that. We record on Radar here with a big analog console, so we can't do that, and I wouldn't do that if I could. I kind of like the old school thing. So you could do all this with tape. They used to use a similar technique back in the 80s. So it was kind of an experiment. You know what? I learned something. And so it was very cool, and I hope you guys learned something too. Thanks.